Okay, so it's 5 p.m. So I would love to welcome everybody to our seventh Run Talk. And now we are live on Facebook on the the Calgary Marathon and the YRC Run Crew Facebook feeds. So welcome everybody to the seventh virtual Run Talk of 2020. We have a fantastic panel for you all today, including the Executive Race Director of the Chicago Marathon, Michael Nishi, the CEO or the Chief Eternal Optimist at the head of NUUN Hydration, Kevin Rutherford, and once again, none other than the amazing Kirsten Fleming, Executive Race Director of the Calgary Marathon and Run Calgary. Welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Fantastic.
Living the dream.
Good in Illinois, good in Seattle. Love it. We're good here too. Yeah, I was very excited for today. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and names here. So welcome, everyone. And great to have Mike and Kevin with us. I'm so excited for this conversation.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be a great talk. I'm really excited for this one. I think, the whole topic of sustainability and industry evolution is something that's really topical to be talking about right now for the whole sport and for the industry now that we're kind of in this really kind of agile state of flux. So thank you guys for joining us today. And in addition to those running the Zoom call, we have a whole bunch of people in the Zoom with us. If you guys would like, you can ask questions using the chat function. Just bring your cursor down to the bottom of the screen, click on chat, and we'll be looking at your questions. We may not get to them right away, but I'm definitely looking at them. And this will be on YouTube later. So a warm welcome to everybody joining us across all of the virtual platforms that we're on today. So some quick announcements before we get into our awesome discussion with this great team. We have some really cool virtual events happening right now. I'm going to save the best for last, which would be yours, Kirsten. But right now we also have Lululemon has the Move and Stay Connected Challenge happening on Strava, which encourages participants to sign up and move at least 20 minutes per day, 5 days a week. This is the last week, so it's the home stretch, everybody. We're almost there as far as the challenge goes, the Strava challenge, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. There's also the Novid 20 Run, which Blaine Penny and the Mito Canada team put on. The Novid 20 Virtual Run is a global virtual challenge using Strava to engage, unite, and inspire our running community to keep motivated, fit, and accelerate research for a COVID-19 vaccine. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our fantastic partners at Big Rock Brewery. Big Rock hosted the first couple of physical run talks. They do deliveries here in Calgary and Southern Alberta, so definitely give them a look, and they're awesome. Also, finally, if you love our content and you'd like to contribute somehow, I'm about to post links to all these fantastic initiatives, as well as a link to our PayPal Me account. And those funds are just used to help develop our digital infrastructure. So things like web hosting, Zoom lines, and everything, all the videos you can find on shutuplegs.org and YRC Run Crew, which will be relaunching later this spring. So I'm just going to paste those into the chat right now. There we go. Okay, so with that aside, Kirsten, I'm going to pass it over to you because you have some exciting news for us as well.
Thank you, Rav. Yeah, well, I'm very excited to be here today. I know there's a lot of people who are part of our Run Calgary family have been following along, and thank you so much for the lovely notes to emails and texts and social media posts over the last couple of days. Run Calgary decided earlier than late last week, but we announced last week that the entire season we are going virtual in 2020, and we're going to refocus our energies on 2021 and getting back to our in-person events then. But we are really excited about the virtual festival. Of course, I'm disappointed and I'm also excited. It's a kind of strange time, but we have put a lot of energy and effort and creative juices into creating the virtual festival. And today we relaunched registration. We had over 200 people register and who are also excited. And there's lots of options, but Scotiabank Calgary Marathon will kick off essentially what is an entire virtual season, followed by the Flapjack 15, which was a new event that we plan to host this year, a virtual stampede event. And then followed by a Beat Beethoven Wild Run and Dash of Doom, as well as our 12 Ks of Christmas, which was what we launched last year. So we have 6 events. All of them count towards the Run Calgary series participants, which you get your Yeti, your custom Run Calgary Yeti. Oops, I've got my green screen. So if you do 4 events or more, you'll get your custom Yeti. I'm not drinking Big Rock today because I'm drinking NUUN. in light of our awesome guest, my immunity. I am holding it right here. I know it's tough to come by these days, but super excited to get into conversation with both Mike and Kevin, who I fiercely admire as leaders. They're both incredibly humble and are not going to toot their own horns. I'm just going to quickly do it for them. I mean, I knew about Mike Nishi long before I ever met him. He is a legend in the industry, and that is because he has really just spent his life really giving back on top of his massive job of creating with his team the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, which is part of the World Marathon Majors, and the Shamrock Shuffle, and his work with Girls on the Run. He also organizes a program called Race Management Program. And I feel super fortunate to be part of that group where we discuss best practices for the industry. And he's really been a leader in, making sure that events that might not have access to things that the World Marathon Majors have access to are able to look behind the curtain and learn from some of the bigger events that have more resources. So incredibly humbled that you would take time out of your busy schedule to be part of our little run talks tonight. And of course, Kevin and I started working together when NUUN came on as a sponsor for our very first ever race series sponsors, I should mention. I was a huge user of the product for many, many years. In fact, 2 o'clock every single day, which in our office is known as NUUN o'clock. I have my hot tea NUUN, which I thought I invented until somebody told me it's like a thing. But almost every day at 2 o'clock, I have a hot NUUN. And more than just the fact that their products are amazing, I have followed Kevin's career. He is an incredible leader as well. And what I admire about both of them is that their values are very much obvious in the way that they lead, and the organizations are, there's manifestation of that in their organizations. I know how hard it is to, make our event sustainable, and we're 12,000 people, 10,000 people, 2,000 people, and it's difficult. And what Mike's been able to do with his team at the Bank of America Chicago Marathon for 50,000 people is just incredible, and it's definitely something that we aspire to. So really excited to get into conversation with all of you and hear questions from the audience. So thanks for indulging me.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm kind of sad because if we're doing virtual races, I don't know if I can really do any race announcing. I'll just.
Well, I think you can. We may or may not have some ways for you to be cheering people on virtually. I mean, that's kind of the exciting opportunity here. I think is like there's an opportunity to really create some new ways for us to interact, and we're using technology in really cool ways. We're relaunching with Race Roster their app called Runkeeper, which has just so many cool upgrades coming in a couple of weeks. And that's what we're going to be using to track and do leaderboards and awards. And depending on which event you're signed up for, all of them, we're going to have some sort of finish line festival online party using this platform. So we hope that you'll host and moderate, Raf. But I know if you're registered for Calgary's fastest 10K, we have one of Canada's fastest men, Sam Effa, who's going to be doing a Q&A about how to get faster. We're inviting you to bring your beer. Dana Pideretsky and Trevor Hoffbauer, who are both going to represent Canada at the Olympics in 2021, are going to be there to also answer your questions about training and how to get faster. I know like Carl, the conductor from the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra, is super pumped to have a rosé with everyone on our post-race celebration after Beat Beethoven. We're going to be going live from the lemur cage with a Q&A with Mona, the head zookeeper, if you're participating in Wild Run. So we invite you to bring your adult beverage and join us for the Finish Line Festival so that we can all, celebrate, wear your medal, wear your shirt, and we'll talk about our races and what the year's been like so we can still keep each other motivated and inspired. So yes, Raf, there will always be a home for you and how you can contribute at Run Calgary.
I'm glad to hear it.
He was trying to get out of his duties for the year, and I just signed him up for more.
Participants will be so excited to hear the deep bass-like voice of my encouraging voice. Okay, well, so I want to get it right into the conversation because we got lots of questions for you guys. A lot of people are really, really excited to hear from you all. And let's start with you, Mike. I don't know if anybody's done the Chicago Marathon. Put something in the chat because I don't know that many people here in Calgary, or at least in the Zoom call right now, have. And one of the big questions I want just to get the conversation started is, Chicago is one of the most famous races, one of the most famous marathons in the world. What's kind of in that special sauce that makes Chicago so unique?
Well, I appreciate that, and thanks for the introduction. It was, I don't think I could, don't want to ever kind of toot my own horn like that, Kirsten, but Kirsten, thank you very much for that. In terms of Chicago, I think, one of the advantages that we have, it's a very, very flat and fast course. And I think a lot of people appreciate that, especially a lot of first timers. I think our number of first time runners to ever to challenge themselves on the distance is a relatively high number for us. I think it's like 40% are first time marathoners. So I think they appreciate the flatness that Chicago has to offer. And I think for those that have run Chicago, it's, the start and finish line is right downtown, centrally located. It's easy and accessible. You don't really have to take transportation there. Most of the major hotels in the downtown district are nearby Grant Park, as we call the area that we start and finish in, right along the lakefront. So it's really accessible, easy to get to. As you're familiar with in terms of Chicago and its location in terms of in the Midwest, and easy to access from all the people that are traveling in domestically as well as internationally with an international airport. And I think it's also, we get great support from our community. So many different volunteers that are coming in from the community and participants. So not that I would imagine that you're not too familiar with how the city is made up, but we have 50 wards, 50 elected officials, and we actually have runners that represent all 50 wards as well as volunteers, which is really great, especially with some of the communities that don't have all the resources that you can imagine, and they're all part of the fabric of the event. And then the event was all through downtown Chicago, through 29 different diverse neighborhoods. So I really feel that those that have come for the first time, they've heard about the accessibility, the ease of the event. And for the repeat runners, I think they really appreciate the community, the fabric, and not a virtual tour, but a tour through all the different communities in which we impact and are part of the event.
Well, that's really cool. I know Chicago is a beautiful city. I had the opportunity of traveling there a whole bunch of times when I was working oil and gas. One of our partners were there, but yeah, I love it. And I think there's something really, really cool about having a race that starts right in kind of the center of the city. And I actually, when I go down to the Calgary Marathon race start, I literally just cross the street to get there. So that's a pretty important feature.
Yeah, makes it easier.
Easier, yeah. And it looks like there was a few people who actually did do the Chicago Marathon. Just looking at the comments here, Teal loved how flat it was until the mini hill that felt like a mountain at mile 26.
Yeah, we threw that in just to make sure that they felt the distance. That's for sure. There's a bridge over some train tracks right at an inconvenient part of the race, right at truly 26 miles, and people call it it's called Roosevelt Road, and they call it Mount Roosevelt. So
Roosevelt. I like that. Well, I'm lots of questions kind of lined up for you here, Mike. So we'll get back to those in a moment. And Kevin, I want to just introduce you. I think every runner now knows who and what NUUN is. So I just want to ask you about like kind of your journey with them. And, I kind of framed this in when I started racing Ironman and marathons, every aid station was just like Powerade or Gatorade. And that's really changed a lot over the past year. Like, what's it been like? What's the journey been like for you at NUUN, and how have you guys kind of progressed and taken it all over?
Oh my gosh. Well, again, thank you as well, to Michael's point, for the gracious introduction. Yeah, NUUN, it's been quite the journey. I've been with NUUN for, it'll be 7 years this year. And the company's been around for about 16 years. So the founder's no longer involved. And the premise of the company, the way it started, actually still exists. From what it started, its roots, it still is the core of it is the same. And the idea is, when we approach categories, right, we go, so using what Kirsten, when she had the immunity product out there as an example, is if we had to start all over again, how would we do it? That's the question we ask ourselves. And so when we looked at it, we said, based on the science, we wanted to separate your hydration from your fuel. There was a lot of physiology behind that. And so NUUN came in with this approach, like I said, about 16 years ago. if you fast forward to where we are today, from there, it's over time continued to grow and get more traction and more visibility, and it's very easy on the stomach and hydrates you really well. So the science is there. It's light. It's different than other sports drinks that are out there as well. So maybe a little less sweet and sugary. And I think that taste bud evolution might be happening in both Canada and the US. So to the point that, thankfully from Kirsten and all of you in Calgary, as well as everyone else in Canada, I believe we're now the most served hydration on course in Canada in run courses. I believe number 2 in the US, behind Gatorade, of course. And so, it's quite the evolution of this little small emerging brand to, wait a minute, a lot of runners know who we are. And so we're feeling really fortunate. The other things that I would say that's kind of evolved in my 7 years at NUUN to kind of help ground people is we started off what I believe is just a really great hydration product. And as I mentioned, as the science was there. But what I really wanted to challenge the team and be part of something bigger was, what is the change we want to make in the world, right? Like, what is the difference? And so I actually am not sure if we're in the business of hydration. I actually think, which maybe that's why Kirsten and Raf, you wanted to have me as part of the discussion, I don't know, but I actually think we're in the business to get people to move more. That's what we're in the business to do. And so we empower people through hydration. And that's the subtle difference. Don't tell that to our investors, because they're like, what are you doing? You're selling hydration. What are you doing? But I really genuinely think that we are obsessed with movement, absolutely obsessed with it. And so I think that focus has really bode well for us. And so that it's also allowed us to innovate. So when Kirsten held up the immunity product that's doing incredibly well for us, it was the sweat occasion is where we started, but now we're at rest, if you will, and wellness occasions. So immunity, I want to boost my immune system and have a daily health routine beyond me getting my sweat on, if you will. We even have an awesome rest product, but I don't think it's quite reached Canada yet, but it's coming soon. And that'll help you sleep a little better too.
Well, I think
send that my way, Kev. I'll be your trial in Canada. Send that my way.
Sending it. I'm addicted to it. Genuinely, I'm addicted to rest. I use it every night. It's also great.
I can't wait to have those here. Kevin, I really like what you said there about, really being in the business of getting people to move more, because I think that if you look at some of the most successful brands today, like NUUN or like Lululemon, like there's a lot of brands out there that really see their purpose as more than just selling, hydration tablets or selling black stretchy pants. And I think that today consumers can sense that, and they want to align themselves with those brands that recognize that, I want my products to represent more than just a product. They want it to represent a brand or a culture, a way of life that positively affects the world. So I really like that. So that kind of brings us to, part of the topic that I really want to dive into here today. And this is a little bit more of a question for the three of you. Everybody who's watching this, I'm assuming, has run through a race course. And I think that there's a perception that we all have. I think I used to have it that, running, it's this super green thing. All you need is a pair of shoes and you go out and run and you have no footprint and it's fully sustainable. But then you go to a race course, and if you've ever been one of the volunteers at the end of the race cleaning this up, you realize that there's a bit more of a footprint than you might think. And so one of the things that we wanted to dive into today was sustainability. And I want to ask you all as a panel, what are some things that, your average runner, your average race goer may not know that you guys as a panel, as an industry, are looking to, move forward or make the industry more sustainable? I don't think that we really recognize the gaps that exist and the hard work that you're doing. So enlighten us.
Mike, why don't you start?
Well, sure. And, I think we all realize that climate change is impacting our world and obviously impacting our sport. And I think it's an opportunity and a responsibility that we have in the endurance sports world, and an opportunity to be leaders. And I think it's an opportunity to combat climate change and to use our platform to do a better job to educate, to inspire, and to inform all of our stakeholders, that being the participants, the volunteers, the spectators, our partners, sponsors, whoever comes in contact with our event. And it's our opportunity to really to focus that attention and to show what needs to be done. And I feel, there's a lot of good that we've been doing, and being such a big event, we're not perfect, but we are at least trying to create, the sustainability practices, and sharing that, like Kirsten, like you said, in terms of all the things that we want to share with our industry. There are certain things that we probably can't do as well as some other events. We definitely want to share that so other people can beat us to that goal, to that end goal. But again, I think, one of the big things that we have been focusing on has been a lot of the circular stories. And I think you're familiar with a lot of them, as I've shared that many times, whether it was Running USA and our race management program here locally. But these are things that we've really taken pride in. I think we're all really familiar with reduce, reuse, recycle, and it's an important part of the sustainability, especially from an environmental standpoint. But also what we found is we also want to develop and create a story around a lot of the practices that we take pride in, that we work so hard. And some of those, and I'll just real quickly go through them. But one of them is our Cups to Soil program. We take, our compostable cups, go through the effort to collect all of them at our aid stations, all 20 of them, then take those to a commercial composting company that basically takes several months to take and take those cups and turn them into compost. And then that enriched compost we're able to take back and collect, and then donate that to a lot of the communities and the community gardens along or throughout Chicago, and some specifically along the course. So when you're able to show and illustrate what can be done between, basically taking a cup and turning it into soil, it's amazing when you can tell that type of story, and the impact that it has. And when you have that ability to make something tangible like that, it really can really deepen and inspire individuals to understand what can be done. The other couple real quick are blankets to boards, our heat sheets, and we do upcycling and take those heat sheets and work with another company that transforms those and basically combines that with sawdust and makes outdoor planking. And so that planking, we basically have them create, or they make different outdoor furniture and products, and we make benches, or take those benches and donate those as well to other communities that need a bench in their playground, need a bench in their garden. So we're able to actually show what can be done by taking a heat sheet and some of those combined plastics, and what can be created from that. And then another one is our bottles of fabric, which, a lot of our PET bottles. We haven't completely closed the loop on this, but we're getting really close. But there are manufacturers out there that can take that PET, those PET bottles, and then take that and make that into flake, into pellets, into yarn. And that yarn, as many of you are aware, is 100% recycled polyester, which is a lot of what our fabrics and our moisture wicking tech shirts are made out of. So we're working with our sponsor in Chicago is Nike. And they don't use actually the bottles or the yarn from our event yet, but we're trying to work on that part. But the shirts, at least, that they do provide are from 100% recycled polyester. A lot of the branding that we do use, and we're trying to convert all the branding, is made from 100% recycled polyester as well. And if you do get it right and you have the right printing on it, and if you have it dated or whatnot, you can actually take that fabric and then recycle that all over again. So we're taking the time, and it will take time for us to get the inventory right, to inspire others, to inform our exhibitors that we have these options available to them, so we can actually have a more sustainable show, working with our partners so they can provide have that type of branding, and they become more sustainable. So they're all in line in terms of what our mission is. So those are just some of the circular stories that we feel are really impactful to help us inspire our participants and stakeholders to be able to understand what we're trying to accomplish. And so they're all, in line with our mission, and hopefully they can carry that throughout, what their practices are as well.
That's fantastic. That's a long list of things that you're doing to, really reduce that environmental footprint of the race. And I think that, like I said at the beginning, I think that some people don't even realize how much work needs to be done to do that. My eyes were first opened to it a few years ago, and this is more in the cycling world, but the Tour of Alberta came through, and you don't really have an appreciation for how big an environmental footprint that a bike race can have until you see a caravan of cars and water bottles that are just being thrown into ditches for whomever to pick up. So it's really interesting to see, endurance sport actually, it is, the good work that you guys are doing to really kind of reduce that footprint that's badly needed, because yeah, I think that we don't really realize sometimes the footprint we leave.
Yeah, I think Mike and his team at CEM, and I know Kat Morris is on the line, so shout out to Kat, who does an incredible job as their sustainability lead at Chicago Event Management. The storytelling piece is so key to get people invested, and they've done a really good job. What I have learned over the last 7-8 years from an operations standpoint is that you can't have a sustainability program that just lives in isolation, because sustainability and environmental practices literally cross over into every aspect of your operations. So from the moment that you are thinking about procuring shirts to the end product when you have shirts that are left over and everything in between. And then as far as like aid stations and education with volunteers, I mean, your stakeholders really have to understand that this is a part of your value system. This is how you're operating your business, and have to have processes in place in addition. So that's one of the challenges that I think we found in our organization, is just the amount of time and dedication it takes from the entire team. And they're so lucky at CEM to have one person who is, probably a little bit of the in the office ringing the green bell all the time. And I very much appreciate that, because I think like in our office, we all kind of play that role. There's 4 of us, and it's like, oh, okay, well, how does that fit into the sustainability plan? So yeah, I really admire what CEM has been able to do. And I just want to say that there's like a lot of big event problems out there that I think we all want to solve. And one of them for me is like getting beyond that triple R, just like Mike said, we're past the recycle and reduce, and now it's sort of like, what about the procurement problem? And I get a lot of questions from people who have been doing races for 35 years and are like, I don't need any more shirts, or I don't even want another medal. Is there any way that I can opt out? And I think that's like an interesting equation that I would like to be able to tackle in the next couple of years, is how do you, with the timeline and purchasing that you have to do for an event of our size or any major event, the timeline is 8-10 months out. So how do you give people an option to opt out and still not be pre-purchasing them, so they're not sitting in a warehouse, which really doesn't lend to the problem solving aspect of it. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Mike, on what are some of those problems that you guys would like to solve around sustainability in the industry.
No, to those exact points. And, again, I think, Kat Morris has been great, like you said, and I definitely want to give her a shout out. We wouldn't be in the position that we're in without, her forward thinking, and really challenging and pushing us and introducing us to, the storytelling, and or else we would have just been doing a lot of just the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra. And she's really given us that ability to create those guidelines and be able to kind of push and challenge us, like I just mentioned. But some of the things that I think, like you just stated, what are some of the things that we can do that we don't necessarily have to date? Those are things that I think we're being challenged right now through the situation that we're all in. Some of the events have been canceled, whatnot. So, do we necessarily have to put dates on things where if something were to happen to create a pause, can we have something that you could reuse without having to sacrifice, recycle, or send something to the landfill? So a lot of what we're learning now, we're just trying to be a lot more creative around. And I think the procurement comment that you had made, those are things that we're trying to get better at as well. Investigating with our metal supplier, is the neck ribbon something that we can create out of 100% polyester as well, so that can be recycled all over again. One of the resources that Kat Morris had found is, inevitably you're going to have some leftover shirts, and some of them you just can't get out into the marketplace. And it was really interesting. One of the things that, Kat had found out or educated me on is, you think, oh, let's ship the container over to somewhere in a country that might need it. But you realize, one, the fuel that it takes over there, but it also takes money out of that community in terms of other sales that could have been from a small retailer. So we found a way that a place that could take the shirts and shred them and use them as filling inside punching bags. So again, it does just take time and people to take the time to look at different options that are available for these recycling or upcycling and reusing a lot that's remains sometimes, unfortunately, after an event. But luckily for us, we have someone like Kat with that type of imagination.
Mike, it sounds like there's a lot of so much of the work you're doing is on products, like what you do afterwards, like after it's been used. And one thing that we're seeing more and more today in this, like, not to belabor the COVID point, but a lot of single use PPE and a lot of single use basically everything. And that's just simply touching something that someone else has touched right now is something that's very top of mind and something we want to avoid. Do you foresee any challenges coming out on the other side of this for your work towards sustainability?
Oh yeah, and we've been having a conversation about that, and with Kat again, it's we know that we're going to have to adjust, and I think as we come out the other end, I think there's going to be a lot of new practices introduced that we're going to carry on, and even after they find hopefully soon a vaccine. I think there's a lot of practices that we will implement that are just going to be expected, just similar to things and from a safety security aspect coming out of 9/11 after the Boston bombing attack. There's a lot of things that impacted our industry, and now people are just used to that and expecting to see a lot more safety security. Things that came out of the hurricane in New York. You're seeing a lot of different event organizers now that have cancellation insurance. That's just a practice in terms of operating events. Now with coming out of the pandemic, you're going to see a lot of the practices when it comes to environmental practices and safety, from sanitization and maintenance. You're going to have things that are going to be expanded upon when it comes to food handling and defense and safety. And then obviously from a logistics and operations aspect, you're going to see a lot more, maybe not as much as we come out of it in terms of social distancing or physical distancing, but a lot of those practices that we are looking at, the different models in terms of how do we get people in and through checkpoints and into corrals, and how do we get and send people off and staggered releases from the start to allow more spacing on the course. I think you're going to find that those practices are going to be kept throughout to allow more space to create a better experience. So we are learning a lot to this. I think there's a lot that we're going to implement to give us that opportunity to host events again, but also things that we're going to keep and that are going to make our events better and create better experiences overall.
Yeah, that's we got a whole bunch of questions over the past 2 weeks for all of our race directors on that one. So I'm going to put a pin in that one, and I'm going to save that for a little bit later in the talk. But I want to quickly pivot that same question over to you, Kevin. And in sort of a different light, but some of the questions that we received on Instagram and on Facebook, people were wondering, like, we use NUUN for more than just, I put in my water bottle when I go for a bike ride. And I think that, people are kind of coming around to the concept that, you could use NUUN for more than that. And you have some really great products to that point. But right now in this time of COVID, are you guys, pivoting at all to, like, I know that you just provided a whole bunch of NUUN to some of our frontline staff. Is that something that you guys are kind of grappling with or working with right now?
In terms of sustainability and our impact?
Sustainability and impact, but also in the time of COVID is like, well, Ian just said NUUN is great for a hangover, but I know that, staying hydrated and staying healthy is really important right now. Are you guys just letting us all kind of discover it, or is NUUN something that we could be, taking?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Just building on a couple things, that's true. It can work for a hangover. Not that I know from personal experience, but maybe even double tab it, but that's a different conversation. Uh, and by the way, Michael, I think I could just sit here and maybe listen to you all day and all the leading edge things that you and the team are doing in Chicago. That is incredible. That is incredible. And I promise, Ralph, I'll get to that. I was just like, my mind was like racing, going, this is awesome. I love the closed loop systems that you're creating over and over and over again. And that's not easy. Like you two know, right? In Calgary, like that's a lot of work. That's dedicated time consistently to try to find solutions. So real like props, big props to the team in Chicago. When it comes to COVID, yeah, so people are discovering NUUN in a whole new ways. That is what's happening. So what's happening for our business, we're actually doing quite well. So we are counter to what's happening in the marketplace. So we are humbled, grateful, and incredibly fortunate. Because here's a couple statistics that I've seen and heard, or at least some rough numbers for you. With what's happening with COVID, some silver linings. People are thinking about the prevention of health possibly more than what they were prior to COVID. This is good news for all of us here, by the way. Obviously not in the very near term, but the good news is people are actually taking action preventatively for their health. I saw a study over the weekend. I was reading it, and it was a study of 13,000 people around the globe. And they were looking to see what the impact of exercise was in their life with respect to COVID. And so they had 3 buckets of people in terms of they exercise 1 or fewer times, 2 or 3 times a week, or 4+ times a week. Many people right here are probably the 4+, not everyone, but many of us are going to be in that. I'll be in that group, that 4+. Here's the downside for us 4+ers. We are actually exercising around, if I remember the number right, it was 16% less post-COVID. So that's the downside. Don't worry, it's going to get better. But this is the avid athlete. They're exercising fewer hours or fewer times because there's no pool, gym. It's tougher to get a bike ride in for obvious reasons. Here's the part that got me really excited. The people that are exercising 1 or fewer times, so not at all in a week, has increased. It's almost doubled. In some cases, it's over doubled. They're exercising not 1, but almost 2. In some cases, 2.4 times a week. This is amazing. This is great news. The people that are exercising, we're exercising 2 to 3 times, are close to 40% up in terms of the amount of exercise they're doing. Now I'll come back, Raf, right back to your questions. What this has to do with NUUN? Remember I told you we're in the business of movement? So that was important for me and for all of us to know. Go, my gosh, people are thinking preventatively about this. Well, we're also seeing when it comes to hydration, and hydration as a core pillar to strengthen your body and your immune system, whether you use immunity product or not. If you get clean hydration into your body, water just is a great start, right? Obviously, electrolytes are gaining more in popularity because people are realizing, oh, that helps me too, beyond the hangover. And that's what's happening with our business, is people are buying NUUN at a higher rate than we've ever seen before. And that's across the line. Immunity in particular happens to sell out faster than everything. But the whole line is selling more because I think people are realizing this can help me. It can help me with my daily health, and it can help me with exercise. It can help me with recovery, proper hydration. I personally believe that the number one thing you could do for health and vitality is to move more. Just move more. Just move more, period. Because it will get the oxygen flowing, it'll get the, everything going, the blood moving in your body, and you will be stronger for it. The next thing you can do is hydrate properly. And the third, and in this order, they're all important, by the way, is proper nourishment. And I won't get into nourishment on this one. The only reason why it comes after hydration in my mind is how long could you survive without water? 5 days-ish. I don't recommend it, but you could maybe. And how long could you survive without food? 60+ days. If you look at hunger strikes, again, I don't recommend it. My point is your body, what does it need? And so NUUN and hydration, what's happened is the need for it is actually ramped up. So like I said, we're really fortunate. We're happen to be in a spot that we never asked for like anyone else, but here we are as a potential solution to strengthen your body. So keep you healthier through this time. Should you come into contact or contract COVID, hopefully your body's stronger to help work your way through it easier. Again, it doesn't cure it, back to Kirsten's question with me before. And I'm not pretending to say that it does. Does that help? Does that answer your question, Rob?
It very much does. And we'll put a disclaimer at the beginning of the call when it goes onto YouTube. You know, this is not a cure for anything. Exactly. It helps you move more.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we got from the Instagram poll came from Haley Goulietz. Haley's a nutritionist, and one of her questions for you was, are there any plans in the future for NUUN to get into any like other types of supplements or powders or nutrition?
Wait a second, Haley, do you have an inside scoop of what's going on here? I'm just playing with you. Yes, for sure. We do focus basically anything that you're seeing from NUUN is the baseline is hydration and amplifying that, and it's almost like hydration plus. And so we do have an endurance product that I think is on course for you for your full marathon and half marathon distance, but the shorter races it's not. Correct. Make sure that we have the right one on course for you. That's what I was worried about. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope you have the right one on course, which I love our endurance product. And that is in a powder format. Everything else is in a tablet, which is actually a powder form, but it's compressed down into a tablet to make it easier to use. And the only reason why we don't have everything in a tablet form is you can only fit so much in that little circle, if you will. And then it becomes too big and then you can't get it into your bottle. So yeah, so here's the if you think about the lineup right now, is it's about hydration first. And so our sport product is high in electrolytes. We also have a vitamin, I call it a vitamin supplement, but it's hydration with vitamins in it. Think of it as you're getting, I think it's, well, actually, no, it's 11 different vitamins and minerals that we find that people that live an active lifestyle tend to be most deficient in. And so we've tried to supplement that, not to fix your RDA, your required daily allowance, but at least bring it closer in. Immunity was another one, which was around daily health. And then the rest product that I mentioned. We do have, like literally in a week and a half, you'll see it announced. There's some other products coming out as well that help for the athlete to help them prepare and recover. So there's a little hint that I probably said too much, but there is stuff coming, and we have so much more. Like there's so much work the team's doing. We're working with a great nutritionist on our team, Vishal Patel, and he works also really closely with, if you haven't heard of her, you should look her up, Dr. Stacey Sims, who resides right now in New Zealand, but usually, and is from the Bay Area in the US. And so we have a lot of really cool things coming and in the pipeline for next year as well.
That's very exciting to hear. It sounds like Haley, you heard it here first. So there's the answer to your question. You're all doing amazing work in this space of sustainability and human well-being, and I think that that's something that is incredible. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, where do you guys draw your inspiration from? Are there brands or events or people that you guys look to for inspiration when it comes to sustainability and kind of just, getting things right, whether it's with regards to, health and personal well-being or putting on sustainable events? Who's your inspiration?
Well, I think, from our inspiration, it started several years ago. And I think everyone's probably familiar with the Big Sur Marathon and our good friend, Doug Thurston. And they were really leading the way, before we all kind of jumped on their bandwagon and their coattails. But they really inspired us, and they cut the path early on, and we followed suit. And he's been a great mentor to many of us. And then we followed suit, and that's when we really started to investigate and see what more we could do and needed to do. So they did definitely inspire us. Another person, because of that, and I think Kevin, you know her really well, is Shelly Villalobos with the Council for Responsible Sport. And we're, our events are Council for Responsible Sport, quote unquote certified, but the Chicago Marathon, for its size, we're the first one of our size to become evergreen status, which is the highest level you can attain based on the criteria that you need to meet. And so we wouldn't have been able to achieve that, obviously, without the stewardship of Shelley and the hard work and effort that Kat Morris had put in. But she is really passionate, stands behind her work, and has really been someone of a great leader to our industry, and a great friend of ours as well. And again, we wouldn't be able to achieve what we've been able to do without her support, giving her as well our platform to be able to communicate from and educate and inspire other people. And I think from a brand standpoint, and I think one of the leaders that I think many of probably this entire audience should be aware of is Patagonia. And it's someone that I really look towards in terms of a brand, what they stand behind. You can just go and take a look in terms of all the great work that they've done. They're worn wear, they repair anything, and they donate 1% of what their annual sales to grassroots environmental groups. Their goal to be carbon neutral 2025. I think what was their other one? All their electricity is in the U.S. is renewable. So I mean, you can go on and on in terms of what they stand behind in terms of their company, and it's just amazing, and definitely a brand that I think a lot of us definitely are inspired by. But again, I think from the event, Big Sur, person, Shelley with Council for Responsible Sport, and a brand like Patagonia, that is definitely very inspiring, at least to me, that's for sure.
Big Sur has actually been on my bucket list for years and years and years. I saw, I don't know when it was just like ranked as one of those beautiful races that you just need to do. And I've told so many people to do it, and a few of them actually have done it, and I still haven't. So hopefully one day. How about you, Kevin?
Well, those are some really great ones that Michael clearly talked about, and he's right. We do work closely with Shelley at the Council for Responsible Sport. We actually, sadly, we didn't really get to bring much to life after Running USA conferences, as all of you know. We launched the practical guide for hosting radically responsible events, and we created that with Shelley at the Council for Responsible Sport. And again, sadly, it won't really come to life this year unless we get a little bit lucky with events in Q4. So we'll see, right, on that one. I would say there's so many inspirations out there. As Michael was talking, I was like looking back as my Canada flag was in the way of like a bookshelf, and in behind there is one of the books is Let My People Go Surfing, which is Yvon Chouinard, right? Oh, Michael's going to pull it out. Here we go. Just for everyone, here's a book, little reading. Michael and I are doing a book club here for you. So good. So Patagonia, Let My People Go Surfing, Yvon Chouinard is just a trailblazer, just a complete and total trailblazer. I love their story. I've got to know people at Patagonia as well, pretty close, and it's pretty amazing what they do and their commitment to the planet. I have this fundamental, I like to simplify things down, because if it's simple, right, it basically, you want to make it simple so it's memorable, so people remember the story, as Michael was starting to talk about, so that it can be actionable. I can do something with it, and then it can be repeatable. And so I've just had with our sustainability team, I had a conversation today. I go, I'm really trying to figure out, team, how do we take movement and apply it to our sustainability practices? In essence, how do we make human power over engine power? How do we make that tangible, right? And so that's kind of the mindset. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. And so when I was thinking about that, there's kind of two approaches. You can either go be less bad, meaning to make less of an impact, or do more good. What's fascinating about what Michael described, I'm like, damn it, he's doing both. Or actually, awesome, he's doing both. He's going less bad and turning it into do more good. And the two companies that came to my mind were Patagonia as well. So both are apparel in this case. Is the less bad is they continue to reduce their impact. No matter what you do, and Patagonia would tell you this, you're going to make an impact. Like, there is a negative impact that's going to happen. So how do you reduce that as much as possible? And then what, on the flip side, how can you make it a closed loop system, or at least do more good? And then one of the examples, a good Canadian company, Tentree, right? I think Tentree is a really fascinating one to me because, so Derek, the CEO and co-founder over there, he and I meet regularly because I'm fascinated by their business model as well. And for every article you purchase from them, they plant 10 trees. imagine if you could actually merge those two, what Patagonia does and what 10 Tree does. I'm like, that would be magic. In the consumer products world, in terms of who I admire, which is very different from what we're talking about, races and apparel, there's, from a sustainability, I guess there's really not a lot of them out there. I did work in cleaning products and Kashi, and there were some there, like Seventh Generation is probably a good one. I wish there was more in our space that we're leading, including ourselves. And here's what I would say is about that is we need to do better, and we can do better. But it doesn't mean it's easy. So if you take the situation of NUUN, where you've got, right, a tube, and so this is a plastic tube, right? That's not ideal. I don't want a plastic tube. So why do we have a plastic tube, right? Well, the reason why we have a plastic tube is it's incredibly lightweight, right? And so it's easy to ship. So its footprint is actually pretty low from that perspective. That's the positive. In addition to that, for those of you that are familiar with NUUN, everything in here needs to be sealed tightly. This cap is designed to absorb any moisture that goes in there, so nothing gets activated. So basically what you need is a medical grade tube that's so clean and keeps everything clean inside for your 10 uses of the different tabs that are in here. So 10 times open, close, needs to work. Now, the question is, how do we replace that with possibly a more sustainable resource, something that can be more recyclable or reused, as Michael's outlined? And so we are working on alternatives, like as an example is aluminum. And aluminum is used over in Europe in some tubes. So we're exploring that right now. And then how do we make that happen, and what's that look like? And so we're working on the testing and going through the whole protocol. So we have a lot of work to do, and we need to do better. There is a reason why it's this, but we need to do better. I guess the other positive, the reason why we chose to do this too, and why we stay there, if you notice, we don't do a ready to drink. So a single-use plastic bottle of water, as an example, we've chosen not to do that. And we chose simply, it's all about sustainability. There's actually a massive business there. But we said, why ship water around? Let's just get you to reuse your water. So grab your water bottle, right? Reuse it, drop a tablet in, and go. So it's a little more work for the consumer, but that's been our approach.
I'm very interested to understand if that's been hard to resist, since it is a obviously huge business in that space, Kevin, and you have investors and people who probably want to see you expand your business and maybe not get into other supplements, but just take the easy route. Has it been hard to resist getting into the single-use bottle space?
Not really.
Not from your personal values, I mean, from a company standpoint.
Yeah. So I probably made the job a little bit easier for me to make it not as difficult. But to be totally transparent, basically we are transparent and we say what we're doing and what we're not doing and why we're doing it. So we've declared outwardly over and over again, we're not doing ready to drink. And so you are right. There are many requests that come and say, just do this thing, it will work. And we're like, no, we're not going to do it. And by the way, didn't you see we're going to be a total hypocrite? We just said we weren't going to do it. And now we're going to do it. So I kind of made my life a little bit easier with any stakeholders that might think a little bit differently. Truthfully, the stakeholders fully support us. But of course, there's always ideas. And then when you say, here's why we don't want to do it. And by the way, we're going to look like a total hypocrite and we don't want to do that either. So both are good reasons, don't you think? And of course, they're going to go, yes. So, it's been easier than you think, fortunately.
I'll put a word of caution. I see there's a whole bunch of people who've jumped on board the 2 tabs at a time train over the course of this past 45 minutes. I accidentally did that with one of my water bottles on my bike 2 days ago, and I put one NUUN tablet in, went and did something else, put another NUUN tablet in, like shut the water bottle, went for my bike ride. Half an hour in, I looked down and just NUUN all over my bike frame. I'm just like, oh, it's pressurized and bit too much pressure in there. I can open it up. I have a whole bunch of questions from the Instagram chat that I'm going to ask you guys in a couple moments. So I'll throw those in there. If anybody wants to ask questions for our panel right now, throw them in the chat as well. And while we're doing that, Kevin, I do want to ask you about one of my favorite podcasts, which you are a part of, or have been on several times, Clean Sport Collective. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think everybody should be listening to it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thanks for asking about that. So at NUUN, we have we have call them our live clean pillars. Clean product, right, which can also lead to better things for the planet in terms of the sourcing of our ingredients and what we do, and everything's plant-based and vegan. Clean planet that we talked about, and the third one is clean sport. So Clean Sport Collective was started, I believe we're 3 years in. Sorry, team, if I'm a little bit off, but roughly 3 years in. It's a nonprofit organization, and NUUN is a founding member. I'm on the board, so I should self-declare that. And the premise of this one was really to change the conversation around celebrating the clean athletes and how do we get doping out of sports. And I had many conversations with two people in particular that I admire, Kevin and Shanna Burnett, who are based out of Boulder, Colorado. And they worked with me at NUUN back at the time, not for our company, but as our communications agency. And they decided to start this, Shanna in particular decided to start this and then asked me to be on the board. Also on there is Kara Goucher, who's pretty popular and famous runner based out of the US. And we started this one, part of it is an inspiration from Kara and other athletes. So I do just want to give a little context, because I think it's important for people to hear this, is competing clean is really important. It's about leveling the playing field. When we don't do that, when you think about the opposite impact when you don't do that, and you're Kara Goucher competing, I think 2-time Olympian, so 2 different Olympics, always once Olympian, always Olympian, but 2 Olympics she attended and raced in. She recently got a silver medal. It was actually the World Championships, but she got a silver medal. Think about and she got it like 10 years plus later, 10 plus years later, she got her silver medal. Here's what happened. Two athletes that finished ahead of her in that race got either the both 2 of the 3 medals. I can't remember which medal. So probably, I guess, gold and silver, right? It's gone. And so they are now taken off, and then Kara ratchet up, and then boom. She missed lots of things from that. But one thing in particular, she lost that moment to be on the podium, to hold her American flag in her case. I did it. She lost that moment. She could never get back. She got her medal with a ceremony, but it's not the same. That to me is heartbreaking. 2, think about the monetary value that she lost, because by finishing first on the podium or second on the podium, there's a lot of monetary value from a lot of brands that will spend to have that, to have you as an athlete endorse them. And she lost all of that because 2 athletes in particular cheated in front of her. Like, just to be blunt, let's just call it what it is. They cheated. They broke the rules and they doped. And so we wanted to start this clean sport to celebrate the clean athletes and get this to change. And it is important. We need to make a call to action. As a brand person, my role was this. And this is where Shanna and Kevin, I think, got excited, and Kara, for me, it was NUUN's little, like in the grand scheme of things, we're small. So, but we can be a voice for change. And that can get the big brands hopefully to jump on board. That's kind of the idea. If the brands all jump on board and say we will only celebrate clean athletes, and we're going to be vocal about it, because I do believe that most brands are about supporting clean athletes. But I think there's also what I don't know. Let's just not talk about it unless it comes out, and then of course we'll deal with it. But let's be proactive and talk about it. And so if athletes know that brands aren't going to tolerate this, there's a zero tolerance policy, the doping will come down. I don't think it will be gone, but it will come down. And that was the whole idea. And I'll say this. So the Clean Sport Collective podcast, go check it out. They have incredible talks that they're doing, a lot of really great interviews on there. And we've kind of found our sweet spot through Kara and Shanna and Chris, who's one of the key interviewers on this, is we found our sweet spot because they have access to these athletes that want to come in and talk about clean because either they felt robbed or they just are passionate about it. And next thing you know, this audience has grown. We were actually trying to accomplish way too much before. We were trying to fix everything. And it was like, stop, let's just be a voice. And let the people that get doping specifically, let's get funding for them, as opposed to us trying to solve that. Let's just be a voice. Yeah, so the Clean Sport Collective podcast, go check it out. Nonprofit organization. It's really, let's change the conversation to celebrating clean athletes.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly important. One of our guests on here a couple of weeks ago, good friend of mine, he's gone through that exact same challenge that Kara's gone through, and having seen it firsthand as well, it's just it's really heartening to see people coming out and kind of drawing a line and saying, like, this is what we stand for, and this is what's important, and this is what we value in sport. And anything below this bar is, if you're not clean, like that's a hard line, and there's no ambiguity around there. So thank you for that. I'm going to switch over to another one of our listener questions, and this is a loaded question for Mike and Kirsten. You can give me a political answer for it, but the question we keep getting is, what are races going to look like in a year or 6 months or 10 months? You know, and there's kind of two questions in here. One was like, would you ever, fast forward a little bit and have athletes bring their own nutrition to races for a period of time, because you can't really have, because of the risk associated with like handing nutrition. You have a runner going through an aid station and they're sweaty and spitting everywhere and all those gross things that runners do, and they're grabbing something from a volunteer. And that's just something that I think today in this context, we're like, whoa, is that, we wouldn't feel comfortable with that right now. What are races going to look like the moment we get back?
Well, I'll just say that we're not trying to do this alone. I feel so fortunate that the race industry is incredibly collaborative. And from someone who comes from a background where it's every woman for herself, which it really is in journalism, which is what I did before this life. I was very surprised to understand how easy it is just to reach out to a race director and be like, hey, what are you guys doing about this problem? I mean, when we were trying to figure out some water algorithms for some new course aid stations, I just kind of reached out to a couple of people and they said, you know what, call Matt West from Boston Marathon and DMSC. And he picked up the phone and he was like, oh, this is how we figure it out. So incredibly collaborative industry, and no one is trying to go at it alone. So I'm waiting for Mike to tell me what we're gonna do. No, I'm kidding. Mike, you've been in conversation and you're leading conversations around some of the best practices that might come out of this. I would love to hear what you foresee races looking like in hopefully the fall, or probably more likely next year.
Well, I wish I had I wish I could look into the future, that's for sure. But there's been a ton of discussion about that. I mean, those are valid ideas in terms of bringing your own hydration, nutrition to the event. The challenges, as you can imagine, like I said at the very beginning, some of the things that we've implemented due to 9/11 and Boston bombing is security checkpoints. And if you run Chicago ever since 2013, or even after 9/11, we implemented a lot of those security and checkpoints. And you can't bring a lot through the gateways, and it slows things down, especially from hydration, opening it up and proving what's in there and taking a sip, whatever. And then there's the other part is like, if you do have a hot day, what happens, right? And do you have enough fluids out there? Are there enough fluids? And if someone didn't bring them, who's liable all of a sudden? So, it just opens up, a lot of other challenges. And then even if you had refilling stations, then how do you ensure that you can, make sure that the spigots and everything else that they're touching is sanitized? So there isn't a silver bullet quite yet, and that's what we're hoping. There's different practices that we're going to take a look at that will definitely help, with some of the distancing, with some of the ways that we handle products and distribute products. And, we're trying to do our best to see what the best practice and approach is going to be. And, some of the other things, and it was interesting, I read an article and it was great. It was a great way to look at in terms of the different crises that are coming out of this. And, we've dealt with the health standpoint. And then we're dealing with the economic standpoint. And I think we're going to have to, we'll all be weathering that as well from an event perspective. And then the next one is liability. And that's where I think a lot of things that we're going to be facing is like what we do, what we don't do, and who's liable. So that's the other part that we have to take a look at further down the road. And a lot of these practices sound good until something happens or doesn't happen. So those are things that we have to pay attention to. I wish I had could answer that concretely, but I can't. I think it's going to take a lot more discussions, and I know that we have a lot of really smart people that are working and collaborating, whether it's with the World Athletics Group and earned international medical groups coming together and collaborating and creating these best practices. And from the AIMS to Running USA, there's a bunch of people working together to come up with some of these practices that we can possibly implement, and especially if maybe there are things that we can't do for our size of an event. However, some of those practices I feel could be employed or are implemented by different size events that could successfully get off the ground and host an event this year. So again, I hate to say wait and see, but there's a lot more work that needs to get to be done, and a lot more discussions. And fortunately, there's a lot of people at the table right now, and I think you're going to start to see a lot of great work and a lot of information come out in the next couple of weeks around this.
I think we're all excited to hear it. I think having had the opportunity to speak to a few race directors right now on RUNTalks, I think that us athletes, we're in good hands. So I have faith in you guys that you're going to have us racing healthy sooner rather than later. Okay, got another listener question. This one came in from Matt Beller. This one's for you, Kevin. It's a softball question, I hope. When is Kona-Cola coming back to Canada?
Uh-oh. Did you see that we did have Kona-Cola come out in the US?
I saw the tweet.
Yeah, we did a seasonal flavor. We didn't get the NPN, is basically the Canadian registered number for it, so it's not going to hit Canada this year. That being said, I'm trying to think of where they can send a note to get to me. I'll send. You know what? Maybe I can send. I see them. No. Maybe I can send some to Kirsten, and Kirsten can give some away to some of your listeners, to you and Raph. Can I send a bunch to you, and then you can give them away?
We would love that. Thank you. I'll do my best to pass them along. How avid of a user I am, but that's awesome. We would love that. Thank you, Kevin.
It's not quite a softball, but it's
I
sort of.
It. So the whole doping question kind of opened up a can of worms in the private questions to me here. So I ask the easiest one, because I feel like that's a whole other, that was actually supposed to be the topic of our next RUNTalk, but this one, this is actually for, this one's for Mike and Kirsten. World records are coming down right now. Is there competition that exists between race directors to get those elite runners to break the world records at races, or is it kind of like it's up to them? You guys put on a race, you do your thing, where they go is where they go?
No, it's there is definitely we're part of the Abbott World Marathon Majors. Yeah, we're one of 6, and they're all prestigious races with obviously great athletes that run in each. And there is that friendly rivalry in terms of being able to see who's had the world record. And fortunately, we were able to get ours for the women's and Bridget Kosgei last year. And and a lot of times it is a friendly rivalry, but from bragging rights and everything. But it is amazing in terms of you invest in those athletes to come and race and participate in your events, and along with that comes a lot of marketing and awareness when they do achieve those goals and you are able to break those records. So again, it does benefit us, and especially the way that the Abbott World Marathon Majors formed in terms of the different points. And then being able to crown a champion, especially if they were able to win and amass those points at your event. So, as much as it is a friendly rivalry, there's that competition to get the best athletes to come to your event.
Well, it looks like Kevin here, or looks like Jeff here is trying to start a GoFundMe campaign to get Kipchoge to come to the Calgary Marathon. So,
can I send the tab to CEM for that? There is honestly, I mean, we obviously aren't in the caliber of the World Marathon Majors, and we still think the athletes who come to Calgary do an amazing job. And we've had some course records over the last couple of years, and it's so exciting. But there's nothing quite like being the race director of a race where a world record has been set. And I was fortunate enough to be not too far from both Mike and his partner, Carrie Pinkowski, who really oversees and manages the elite program in Chicago, when the record fell last year. And it's very exciting.
I can only imagine. It's an exciting time for sports, seeing especially the way that the women's world record has come down over the past few years. So I got another easy one. They could have just put it in everyone, but Kevin, what's your favorite flavor of NUUN? Or is it some one that we don't have access to?
No, definitely not. You know what? Actually, I'm looking on my desk here, and here's an interesting, this is a double tab scenario for you. But so for the new fruit punch, like this revised flavor is actually, these two are my favorite. So, but someone gave me another tip. So there's fruit punch, and the new orange is like ridiculously delicious. It actually tastes like an orange. It's amazing. Combine these two, throw two in. I've done it. Someone told me to do it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's quite the combination. It's really good. Though seriously, maybe even like if you have a tube of each, like break it in half, take a half and half, and dump it in. It's so good. It's so good.
I heard Kevin earlier just talk about being obsessed with movement. I know that's we've had lots of conversations about this. I am obsessed with your company culture at NUUN, and just obsessed with Nishi, your leadership style, and you're constantly reading and sending me podcasts, and you have an incredible memory. And I just am wondering if you can give some insights into the unique cultures, both at NUUN and CEM. And I know a lot of it comes naturally, and it depends on who you hire, and like attracts like. But how do you go about intentionally creating positive company culture, and what are some concrete tactics you would have for me or anybody who's also obsessed with creating a positive company culture?
Want me to go first, Michael? Yeah, sure. I'm obsessed with culture, I think, as you know, Kirsten. I truly believe it is the single biggest competitive advantage, if that's even the right word of competitive, but the advantage of any team in business, school, sports. It really is. It's the magic. You can win with a crappy culture short term, like succeed, but you can't succeed sustainably over time with a culture that's not thriving. So I would say this. I think there's a paradigm shift that people have to think about when it comes to culture. And the paradigm shift is this: is culture is alive. Like it's an ecosystem. Speaking of sustainability, it's an ecosystem, and everything's interconnected. And this thing is alive, and you need to constantly feed it and nurture it and shape it and mold it. For every person that leaves the company, leaves your team, the culture changes. For every new person that comes in, the culture changes. COVID happens, the culture just changed, right? And that's okay. It's alive. So how do you feed it, shape it, and continue to keep it moving? And you need to be obsessed with it. So especially as you as the leader, you set the tone. However, what I also tell the team, and our team at NUUN, and they know this, I say it all the time. I go, I get it. I set the tone, but the culture isn't Kevin's culture. The culture is our culture. We all own it. Like we all own it. So it really comes down to the shared values as a team, and the values come to life through our behaviors. And so you need to really identify those things. So as an example, some ones that we use at NUUN are energy giver, right? In any given situation, you can be either an energy giver or an energy taker. It doesn't mean everything's positive. It means I'm here to listen, I've got empathy, or I'm gonna try to move it forward, as opposed to vent, take it down. And we all get mad. Like we all go through emotions. I get it. So you have a choice in that moment when you're around people. How do you want to infuse that? So like, we know that as a team, like that's energy taking. Stop it. Stop that right now. And then that's the behavior of, we try to keep each other honest. Accountability, right? Like say what you're going to do what you're going to say? Servant leadership, right? Like, how do you serve your teammates and help them win? So that my philosophy is, it's alive. It's alive. Be obsessed with it as a leader. Recognize you set the tone, but everyone has a role to play in it, and you've got to nip the cancer, if you will, for lack of a better way of putting it, in the bud really quickly if it's not working. It's like, stop, that's not cool, that's not working. And one of my favorite little stories, by the way, is when, because we're one of the things on a cultural vibe of NUUN, everyone at NUUN's an athlete. Everyone's at NUUN's an athlete. And when I say that, that means everyone believes in the power of movement. And I still remember this person that was interviewing for a role, who was very qualified and actually was about to get the offer. And she pulled out of just before she got the offer, she pulled out, she goes, "This culture, you guys are crazy." And I was asking what the feedback was. And it's like, "You guys are crazy. Like, this team, they just like all love movement." And she was like, and she was a runner. This is what I found mind-boggling. I'm like, she had the talent to have the run. I'm like, what's going on? But she thought that, I think she thought that she had to infuse all of her personal life into work or something. I don't know. But the fact that she got the vibe of the culture, like, so strongly, consistently across other people, and for whatever reason that scared her off, which I still don't get, but that's okay. I go, that's amazing, because we've put it at the forefront and said, this is who we are. We want diversity in talent, we want diversity in mindset, but we all share one fundamental belief, and that's, we believe in the power movement. And if you don't like that, you're going to be miserable here. Don't come, I promise. You're going to hate it. But if you like that and you're really into it, it's going to be fun.
I feel like if I ever leave Run Calgary, which is very unlikely, but I'm coming knocking to work there, because I am also obsessed with culture and movement. So I love that passion.
Come on.
No, and I would echo everything that Kevin says and said. It's just so true. And in terms of the culture is alive. Again, you can't. A lot of times you want to set it and what are your mission, vision, values, and over and over and over again. But it is very fluid. And it does change, and the dynamic changes, and the environment changes, and it changes us, and you have to adapt to that. And obviously, it's important to understand what our purpose is, what our mission is, and you need to communicate that over and over. But also respect in terms of who makes up your culture, and be part of that, and help influence it and let it grow. And I love what Kevin, you said in terms of setting the tone, and that's something that I believe. And if you're not familiar, we have, last year we had 45,963 finishers, and we have 12,000 volunteers. And it's incredible in terms of how we're able to recruit and retain volunteers year over year over year. And one of the things that, we started, and it wasn't always like that. When we started, Carrie Pinkowski and I, let me just set the record straight. Carrie Pinkowski is the executive race director and the general manager. But we've been partners ever since 1989. And back then it was just the two of us. And, it was a lot easier back then because we might have had 5,000 runners to where we are today. But one thing that we remembered is like, we would never ask anyone to do something that we weren't willing to do ourselves. And that is the mantra that we have. And that's something that we want to make sure that in each one of us and everyone that and Kirsten, in terms of our team, they would do anything that they would ask, that we ask anyone else to do with us. So that's something that I really feel is our culture, and then that you would find just throughout our events within our office, and throughout every individual that you would meet in our organization. And I think that's a really shared value that we have that's important to us. And again, I think that that's something that always echoes no matter what. It's like there's, when we were doing a lot of the packet assembly, we would be there, and some of the volunteers would be like, "Carrie, Mike, why are you here?" It's like, we want to be here. This is that's the part of the job that we love. It's all this other stuff that we don't love, all the liability, all the risk, and all the other stuff that we have to focus on. That's not the fun part. It's the important part, but the fun part is like being able to connect with our participants, with our volunteers, with the community. And that's what we love most.
You know what I love? One last thing that you just said, Michael, that I love this is, and what you described is, first of all, leaders, to be a leader, you would never ask somebody to do something you wouldn't be willing to do yourself. And that's what you just described. And I think that that also sets the tone. Because then if you're willing to do that, then someone else is willing to basically do that with someone else in the team. And this is this like viral effect in a good way that continues to happen. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, I like that's absolutely true because I've witnessed it firsthand, but I also want to just like maybe share with some of the people who are, you know, runners at the Calgary Marathon that not only does Mike do that at his own races, but he goes to races like all over the world. And he's been to the Calgary Marathon, I think 2 or 3 times. And, you know, he'll be there until like 8 o'clock the night before the race when we have to be up at 3 in the morning because he's helping me set up like our forward command and literally running cable and just the most, you know, overqualified cable layer I've ever seen. But he'll be the last one standing and make sure that everything is done and then be the first one back on site, whether it's his event or somebody else's. So even after, you know, 30 plus years in the business, that's pretty incredible. You have a lot of stamina.
It's amazing.
All right. Well, I guess that's about all the time that we have today. I just want to thank you very much for taking the time, Kevin and Mike and Kirsten, of course. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you guys today. This is one of my favorite Run Talks so far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin and Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, team. Oh, Canada.
Okay.
See you next week.
Next week, and May the 4th be with you, everybody. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, that's right. May the 4th be with you.
Hey, Kirsten, it's cold enough here to put my toque on.
Yeah, you're Run Calgary toque.
Awesome. So new Chicago 2021. Thanks very much, everybody.
Cheers.
Peace.